Hidden deep in the highlands of Ethiopia lies a place that defies logic, a sacred city carved entirely from solid rock, where towering churches stand not built but excavated, as if the earth itself opened up to reveal them. These are the legendary churches of Lalibela, often hailed as the eighth wonder of the world. Picture this: 11 medieval monuments, each one hollowed out from a single block of volcanic stone, their roofs level with the ground, their walls adorned with ancient crosses and hidden passages. But here's the real mystery: how were they made? With no evidence of scaffolding, no records of the tools used, and no explanation for the precision of their design, these structures have baffled historians and architects for centuries. Some say angels lent a hand under the cover of night. Others believe it was the work of a divinely inspired king, but the truth, it's still waiting to be uncovered. What makes Lalibela even more extraordinary is the sheer scale of the endeavor. Imagine chiseling an entire cathedral floor to ceiling, pillar to arch from the living rock beneath your feet. The largest church, Bete Giyorgis, stretches 100 feet long, 70 feet wide, and 35 feet high, all carved downward into the earth. The workers didn't just shape stone, they removed it, hauling away enough material to fill thousands of wagons. And yet, there's not a single pile of rubble left behind, no trace of the debris. It's as if the vanished stone simply dissolved into thin air. How did a civilization over 800 years ago achieve such a feat without modern technology? The answer might lie in something far more surprising than we've ever considered. This isn't just a story about architecture. It's a window into a lost world of faith, ingenuity, and perhaps even divine intervention. The churches of Lalibela were never meant to be monuments. They were designed as a spiritual sanctuary, a new Jerusalem for those who couldn't make the pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Every tunnel, every symbol, every hidden chamber was crafted with intention, whispering secrets across the centuries. And today, we're going to follow those whispers. Together, we'll explore the clues left behind, from the tools that might have been used to the legends passed down through generations. By the end, you won't just see these churches, you'll feel the weight of their mystery, and maybe, just maybe, you'll start to piece together the puzzle yourself. The legend of King Lalibela isn't just a tale, it's the heartbeat of this sacred place. According to Ethiopian tradition, the king didn't merely commission these churches. He received a vision so powerful, it transformed the landscape itself. As the story goes, while Lalibela lay in a death-like slumber after being poisoned by his jealous brother, angels carried him to heaven. There, God commanded him to return and build a new Jerusalem, a sanctuary so magnificent it would echo the glory of the holy city itself. And here's where the legend takes an astonishing turn. They say the king didn't work alone. Heavenly beings joined the effort, laboring alongside mortal hands under the cover of darkness, carving the churches in a single miraculous night. But why would such a myth persist for centuries? For the people of Ethiopia, this isn't just folklore, it's faith made visible. The churches aren't merely structures, they're proof of divine intervention, a testament to a king chosen by God. Every year, thousands of pilgrims travel to Lalibela, not just to admire the architecture, but to touch the walls where heaven and earth once met. They kneel in the shadows of these rock-hewn sanctuaries, convinced that the same angels who guided Lalibela's chisels still linger in the air. Yet beneath the legend lies a fascinating historical puzzle. King Lalibela ruled in the 12th century, a time when Ethiopia was isolated, surrounded by hostile forces. Some scholars suggest the churches were a defiant statement, a spiritual fortress carved into the very land itself. Others point to the king's exile in Jerusalem, theorizing that he recreated the holy city's grandeur to console his people, barred from pilgrimage by war. But whether divine or human, one thing is certain: the legend of Lalibela endures because it speaks to something deeper than stone. It's a story of hope, resilience, and the unshakable belief that even the impossible can be carved into reality. Standing in the shadow of these 11 churches feels like stepping into an ancient dream where human hands and divine inspiration blurred into one. Each structure emerges from the earth like a living sculpture, shaped not from assembled stones but excavated from a single, massive block of volcanic rock. The most iconic of them all, Bete Giyorgis, rises in the perfect form of a cross, its roof a flawless geometric masterpiece level with the surrounding ground. To stand above it is to look down upon a sacred symbol, as if the very land had been imprinted with faith. But the wonder doesn't stop there. Walk through Lalibela, and you'll discover each church carries its own mystery. Some plunge deep into trenches, their doorways hidden until you're nearly upon them. Others connect through a labyrinth of tunnels and drainage systems, carved with such precision that even today, 8 centuries later, they still channel rainwater away from the sacred spaces. The alignment of these churches is no accident either. They mirror the spiritual geography of Jerusalem. Bete Giyorgis echoes the site of Christ's crucifixion, while the river Jordan is represented by a trench that fills with water during ceremonies, allowing pilgrims to reenact baptisms just as they would in the Holy Land. What's truly staggering is the variety in design. Some churches stand as simple, solemn chambers, while others boast intricate archways, columns, and even windows carved to filter light in sacred patterns. The craftsmen didn't just remove rock. They sculpted illusions, creating the appearance of freestanding buildings where none actually exist. And all of it was done without blueprints, without modern tools, and without leaving behind a single scrap of the original stone. The only clues we have are the marks left on the walls, chisel strokes so consistent. They suggest a level of skill and coordination that rivals even the finest cathedrals of Europe. Yet perhaps the most haunting question isn't how they were built, but why in this exact way. The churches weren't placed randomly. They form a deliberate pilgrimage route, guiding worshippers through a physical and spiritual journey. Every turn, every step downward was designed to mimic the path a devout traveler would take in Jerusalem, its architecture as worship, stone as scripture. And to this day, when the priests chant inside these hollowed halls, the sound doesn't just echo, it vibrates through the rock itself as if the very earth is joining in prayer. The mystery of how Lalibela's churches were carved goes deeper than the rock itself. It lies in the absence of answers. Archaeologists have scoured the site for centuries, yet not a single tool, not one discarded chisel or hammer has ever been found. This isn't just unusual, it's unheard of. Every other ancient construction site, from the pyramids to the Parthenon, leaves behind fragments of its craft, broken tools, leftover materials, even workers' marks. But at Lalibela, the stone itself is silent. So how did 12th century craftsmen achieve such precision without leaving a trace? One theory points to simple iron chisels and wooden wedges tools that would have been available at the time. Modern experiments show that skilled hands could carve soft volcanic rock with these basic implements, given enough time and patience. But here's the catch: Lalibela's churches aren't just carved, they're orchestrated. The symmetry, the intricate details like the lattice windows of Bete Amenul or the faux beams of Bete Mariam, suggest a level of planning and execution that goes far beyond rudimentary tools. Some researchers speculate about lost techniques, methods so efficient they vanished with the artisans who mastered them. Could they have used heated tools to soften the rock? Or a system of mirrors to reflect sunlight and guide their cuts? The truth is, we may never know. Then there's the puzzle of the debris. Removing enough stone to create 11 churches would have generated thousands of tons of rubble. Yet there's no quarry site, no pile of discarded rock fragments in the surrounding area. One tantalizing theory suggests the workers repurposed every last chip, crushing the excess into mortar or scattering it so thoroughly nature reclaimed it. Others wonder if the stone was hauled away for other constructions, though no nearby structures match the rock's distinct color and texture. But the most haunting possibility, that the method of removal was so ingenious, so unlike anything we've seen before, we simply haven't recognized the evidence right in front of us. What makes this enigma even more compelling is the cultural context. Ethiopia in the 12th century was no stranger to grand projects. The nearby cliffside churches of Tigray prove that, but Lalibela stands apart. The precision of the carvings, the uniformity of the chisel marks, even the way sound travels through the hollowed chambers, all of it suggests a sophistication that defies the era's known technology. Were the builders working from a forgotten tradition? Did they inherit knowledge passed down from an even older civilization? Or is the answer something simpler, yet no less profound, that human ingenuity, when fueled by unwavering faith, can achieve what logic says is impossible? The churches of Lalibela don't just challenge our understanding of history, they humbly remind us that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be witnessed, to stir wonder, to whisper across time that the line between the earthly and the divine has always been thinner than we think. To understand the audacious vision behind Lalibela's churches, we need to step back into the turbulent world of 12th century Ethiopia, where power, faith, and legacy collided. The Zagwe dynasty, a line of kings often overshadowed by their Aksumite predecessors, ruled during this era, a time of both fragility and fervor. Unlike the Aksumites, who traced their lineage to the biblical Queen of Sheba and King Solomon, the Zagwe were seen as usurpers by some, their legitimacy constantly questioned. And here lies the key to their motivation. Lalibela wasn't just a spiritual haven, it was a bold political statement carved in stone. The Zagwe kings faced a dilemma. The Aksumite kingdom, with its ancient roots and legendary ties to Judaism and early Christianity, had left towering obelisks and the revered Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in its wake. To secure their place in history, the Zagwe needed something equally monumental but different. Instead of building upward like Aksum, they dug downward, transforming the rugged highlands into a sacred landscape that mirrored heaven itself. This wasn't mere imitation, it was a reinvention of sacred architecture, a way to proclaim their divine right to rule through artistry and devotion. Religion was the heartbeat of this strategy. By the 12th century, Ethiopia was encircled by Islamic states, and Christian pilgrims faced dangerous journeys to Jerusalem. The Zagwe seized this moment of isolation to create a substitute, a new Jerusalem where the faithful could worship without fear. But there's a deeper layer. Lalibela's churches also served as a spiritual counterweight to Aksum's legacy. Where Aksum boasted the Ark of the Covenant, Lalibela offered something equally potent, an earthly gateway to the divine, carved not by Solomon's descendants but by a dynasty determined to etch its name into eternity. The rivalry simmered in every chisel stroke. Take the church of Bete Giyorgis, where replicas of the tombs of Christ and King Lalibela himself lie side by side, a quiet but unmistakable claim of sacred kinship. Even the tunnels connecting the churches may have held symbolic meaning, echoing the hidden passages of Aksumite crypts while forging a new pilgrimage route entirely of Zagwe design. This wasn't just construction, it was a carefully crafted narrative in rock, a rebuttal to anyone who doubted their piety or power. Yet the Zagwe's ambition may have been their undoing. The sheer resources poured into Lalibela, the labor, the artistry, the years likely strained the kingdom. And in the end, the very grandeur meant to secure their legacy couldn't silence the old Aksumite aristocracy. Within a century of Lalibela's completion, the Zagwe dynasty fell, replaced by rulers claiming Solomonic bloodlines. But the churches endured, outliving their creators' political dreams to become something far greater. A testament not just to one dynasty's ambition, but to the timeless human yearning to touch the divine. What's striking is how the Zagwe story mirrors the very rock they shaped, layers of intention hidden beneath the surface. Their motives were political, their methods ingenious, but the result transcended both. In seeking to rival Axum, they accidentally created a wonder that would unite all Ethiopians, Zagwe and Axumite alike, under the shadow of these sacred stones. The churches stand today not as a monument to a fallen dynasty, but as a bridge between earth and heaven, between rivalry and reverence, proof that even the most earthly of ambitions can sometimes carve a path to the eternal. Beneath the sunlit sanctuaries of Lalibela lies another world entirely, a shadowy network of tunnels and passageways winding through the rock like veins beneath skin. These aren't mere corridors, they're threads in a sacred tapestry, connecting the churches in ways that blur the line between architecture and allegory. Some tunnels stretch just a few yards, barely wide enough for a single person to pass. Others plunge into darkness, their walls worn smooth by centuries of pilgrim hands brushing against them as they navigate the labyrinth. But why carve such an intricate underground web? The answer may lie in three layers of purpose: practical, ceremonial, and profoundly symbolic. Start with the most immediate use: escape. Ethiopia in the 12th century was a land under siege, with rival kingdoms and encroaching forces threatening its Christian heart. The tunnels could have served as hidden arteries, allowing priests and worshippers to vanish into the earth at a moment's notice. Some passages lead to secluded chambers, while others open unexpectedly to the cliffs beyond the city, perfect for slipping away unseen. Yet survival wasn't their only function. These pathways also orchestrated movement during religious rites. Imagine monks processing through the dim glow of oil lamps, chanting echoing off the narrow walls as they moved from Bete Mariam to Bete Golgotha, retracing the steps of Christ's passion through rock instead of cobblestone. But the most captivating theory transforms these tunnels into something far grander, a pilgrimage in miniature. For Ethiopians cut off from Jerusalem by war and distance, Lalibela was more than a substitute, it was a reenactment. The tunnels mirror the winding paths of the Via Dolorosa, while trenches filled with water during baptisms stand in for the River Jordan. Pilgrims didn't just visit these churches, they journeyed through them, descending into the earth like Christ into the tomb, only to emerge into the light of resurrection at Bete Giyorgis. Even the darkness played its part, a deliberate contrast to the sunlit sanctuaries, heightening the spiritual climax when worshippers finally stepped into the radiant space of a church interior. Then there's the mystery of the unmarked passages. Not all tunnels lead to known destinations. Some dead end abruptly, their purpose lost to time. Others slope downward, hinting at chambers yet undiscovered. A few even align with celestial events. During certain solstices, slivers of sunlight pierce the gloom, illuminating carvings invisible in ordinary light. Were these meant to guide initiates through secret rituals, or were they left unfinished like the rock-hewn staircase that spirals into a solid wall, a ghost of some grander plan interrupted? Perhaps the most haunting detail is the acoustics. Speak softly in one tunnel, and your voice carries with uncanny clarity to a church 50 feet away. Priests might have used this to chant blessings unseen, their words seeming to rise from the stone itself. It's a reminder that every inch of Lalibela was designed not just for bodies to move through, but for souls to resonate. The tunnels aren't just connections between spaces, they're conduits between the earthly and the divine, carved by hands that understood faith as something not just to be believed, but to be walked tunnel by tunnel, step by step in sacred darkness. The most striking revelation about Lalibela isn't just how the churches were carved, it's why they were arranged with such deliberate symbolism. Walking through this sacred complex feels like stepping into a mirror image of Jerusalem itself, transplanted into the Ethiopian highlands. Every trench, every tunnel, every carefully placed church aligns with biblical geography, transforming the entire site into a coded map of the Holy Land. Take the trench known as Jordanos, its name is no accident. This narrow channel fills with water during religious ceremonies, becoming a stand-in for the River Jordan, where pilgrims reenact baptisms just as they would halfway across the world. Nearby, the church of Bete Giyorgis echoes the site of Christ's crucifixion, while a nearby chapel houses a replica of the tomb of Adam, said to rest beneath the biblical Calvary. Even the colors carry meaning. The russet red rock of Bete Amenul mirrors the sandstone of Jerusalem's ancient walls. But this wasn't mere imitation, it was spiritual ingenuity born of necessity. By the 12th century, Ethiopia's Christian community found itself increasingly isolated, cut off from Jerusalem by expanding Islamic empires. Pilgrimages became near impossible, fraught with danger. Lalibela's architects faced a profound challenge: how to keep faith alive when the sacred center of their world was out of reach. Their answer was radical: bring Jerusalem to Ethiopia. The layout wasn't designed for convenience. It was a pilgrimage in stone, guiding worshippers through the same spiritual journey they would have taken in the Holy Land. The tunnels became the crowded streets of Jerusalem, the sunken courtyards its temple squares. To walk from Bete Medhain Alam to Bete Mariam was to retrace the steps between the Holy Sepulchre and the Mount of Olives, each turn imbued with ritual significance. Scholars debate how precise the parallels were intended to be. Some argue the layout follows a symbolic rather than literal map, condensing Jerusalem's sprawling geography into a compact, walkable devotion. Others point to subtle clues suggesting astonishing accuracy. The placement of Bete Giyorgis, standing slightly apart from the northern cluster of churches, mirrors the isolation of Mount Zion. The network of drainage channels not only prevents flooding but replicates Jerusalem's ancient water systems. Even the act of descending into the churches carries biblical weight. Worshippers literally go down into the rock, echoing Christ's descent into the tomb before emerging into the light of resurrection. The genius of this design lies in its layers of meaning. For the uninitiated, Lalibela appears as a marvel of engineering. For the faithful, it's a living scripture. During major festivals, priests lead processions along routes that mirror the stations of the cross, chanting hymns that have echoed through these passageways for 800 years. Pilgrims crouch to enter low doorways, a physical act of humility meant to mimic bowing before the Holy Sepulchre's threshold. The entire experience is designed to engage the body as much as the soul, turning theology into something tangible. What's often overlooked is how this replica Jerusalem also became something uniquely Ethiopian. Local traditions weave seamlessly into the biblical framework. The Church of Bete Mariam features carvings of the Virgin Mary surrounded by indigenous flora and fauna, blending familiar imagery with the sacred. The tomb of King Lalibela himself rests beside the replica of Christ's tomb, binding national identity to divine narrative. This wasn't just a copy of a holy city, it was a reinvention, a place where Ethiopian Christians could connect to Jerusalem while still rooting their faith in their own soil. The enduring power of Lalibela lies in this duality. It's both a tribute to a distant sacred site and a defiant declaration that the divine isn't confined to one place. By carving Jerusalem into the heart of Ethiopia, the builders didn't just solve a logistical problem. They made a theological statement. Heaven wasn't somewhere beyond the horizon. It was right here, waiting to be uncovered, one chisel stroke at a time. The silence surrounding the builders of Lalibela is as profound as the churches themselves. While ancient monuments like the pyramids of Giza have left behind worker villages, tomb paintings, and payroll records, not a single inscription or artifact at Lalibela names those who carved these marvels. This absence sparks as much intrigue as the structures. Were these artisan slaves, devout volunteers, or members of a secretive guild whose knowledge died with them? Consider the logistics. 11 churches, each demanding the removal of thousands of tons of rock, would have required a workforce numbering in the hundreds, possibly thousands, laboring for decades. Yet Ethiopian chronicles from the era mention only King Lalibela's divine inspiration, not the calloused hands that translated his vision into stone. Contrast this with Egypt's pyramid builders, whose graffiti proudly marks their work. names like the Friends of Khufu gang etched into blocks. At Lalibela, the workers vanish into history, leaving behind only the whisper of chisels. One compelling theory suggests these weren't coerced laborers but skilled craftsmen bound by faith. Medieval Ethiopia had a tradition of selamit, voluntary communal work for sacred projects. Farmers might pause planting seasons to contribute, believing the labor itself was an act of worship. This mirrors the building of Europe's cathedrals, where entire towns donated time and resources for heavenly rewards. Perhaps Lalibela's workforce rotated seasonal teams of masons, carvers, and haulers working in shifts, their identities secondary to the collective mission. But darker possibilities linger. The Zagwe dynasty's rivals accused them of relying on enslaved prisoners of war, though no archaeological evidence supports this. Unlike the pyramids, where skeletons show signs of forced labor and injury, Lalibela's site holds no graves, no remnants of a workers' camp. The absence cuts both ways. It neither confirms nor denies exploitation. What's truly striking is the precision of the work. The consistent chisel marks the flawless symmetry. This speaks of trained artisans, not conscripted farmers. Some scholars propose a lost guild, their techniques passed down through generations like medieval European stonemasons. In this light, the lack of records might be deliberate. If mastery of rock carving was a guarded secret, the builders may have erased their own footprints to protect their craft. Compare this to other megalithic projects. Easter Island's Moai statues were carved by rival clans boasting of their deeds. Rome's Colosseum bore stamps from imperial brickmakers, but Lalibela stands apart, a monument without signatures where the focus remained entirely on the sacred result, not the human hands behind it. The closest parallel might be India's Ajanta caves, where Buddhist monks painstakingly carved monasteries into cliffs over centuries. Like Lalibela, their creators left no names, only the work as an offering. This shared anonymity hints at a profound cultural difference. Where some civilizations built to glorify rulers, others carved to honor the divine, effacing themselves in the process. Perhaps the answer lies in the churches themselves. Walk through their shadowed halls, and you'll notice something unexpected. The doorways are uniformly low, forcing even kings to bow. This architectural humility might reflect the builder's ethos, that no individual should overshadow the sacred space they created. In the end, the mystery of Lalibela's workforce may be the most fitting tribute of all, a reminder that some wonders transcend the ego of their makers, whispering instead of collective devotion, of countless unnamed hands moving as one toward something greater than themselves. One of the most astonishing aspects of Lalibela's construction isn't just that the churches were carved from rock, it's how the workers approached the stone itself. Unlike traditional building where materials are stacked upward, these artisans worked in reverse, excavating downward as if peeling away layers of the earth to reveal the sacred spaces hidden within. Picture standing on a massive plateau of volcanic rock, your tools not lifting blocks into place but chiseling away everything that isn't the church. This top-down method required a level of foresight that borders on clairvoyance. One wrong strike, one misjudged depth, and an entire wall could crumble. The process began with precision marking. Workers would outline the church's footprint on the rock surface, then carve narrow trenches around it, gradually deepening these channels to isolate the structure from the surrounding stone. As they dug downward, the church emerged like a sculpture from a block of marble, except here, the block was the living earth itself. The walls weren't assembled, they were uncovered, their curves and arches shaped by what was removed rather than what was added. This technique eliminated the need for mortar or supports during construction. The weight of the untouched rock surrounding the site acted as a natural stabilizing force, holding everything in place until the final moment when the last connecting stones were split away. What's truly staggering is the interior work. While the exterior took shape, teams simultaneously hollowed out the inside, creating vaulted ceilings, columns, and windows, all from above, like digging a basement but with the ceiling already perfectly formed. The artisans had to visualize the final space in 3 dimensions as they carved, knowing any error in depth would leave a pillar too thin or a dome uneven. Some churches, like Bete Giyorgis, even feature intricate faux architectural details mimicking wooden beams and door frames in solid rock, a playful testament to their mastery of illusion. The risk of collapse haunted every step. Without modern surveying tools, workers relied on sound tapping the stone to judge thickness and generations of inherited knowledge. The rock itself offered clues. Softer layers signaled areas needing reinforcement, while denser sections could bear more elaborate carvings. Occasionally, they'd leave guide stones, small unremoved protrusions that acted as supports during excavation, later chiseled away when no longer needed. These subtle strategies reveal a sophistication that challenges assumptions about medieval engineering. Perhaps most remarkable is the seamless unity of the interiors. Unlike constructed buildings where walls meet floors at joints, Lalibela's spaces flow without seams, floors, walls, and ceilings, all one continuous piece. Walk through Bete Mariam, and your fingers will find no edges where elements connect, only smooth transitions that make the very idea of assembly irrelevant. This organic wholeness gives the churches an almost otherworldly feel, as if they've always existed within the stone, waiting to be unveiled rather than built. Yet the method also posed unique challenges. Removing debris required hauling it upward through the trenches, a logistical nightmare when working on the scale of Bet Medhain Alam, where workers excavated enough material to fill multiple Olympic-sized swimming pools. The lack of leftover rubble suggests an almost obsessive efficiency, every chip of stone accounted for, possibly repurposed into mortar or carried far from the site to preserve the illusion that these churches weren't made but revealed. This top-down approach wasn't just practical, it was philosophical. By carving downward, the builders mirrored the Ethiopian spiritual concept of descent, the belief that divinity often meets humanity through downward movement, whether God speaking from mountaintops or angels descending to earth. The very act of construction became a meditation. As workers dug deeper, they weren't just creating space, they were enacting a sacred journey, moving closer to the holy with every stroke of the chisel. The churches, therefore, aren't just objects in the landscape, they're invitations to look downward for revelation, to find the sacred not in distant heavens but in the very ground beneath our feet. The age of Lalibela's churches has always been framed by the reign of King Lalibela in the 12th century, but what if the stone itself tells a different story? A growing number of geologists are raising a startling possibility. The erosion patterns on these monuments suggest they might be far older, their origins lost in the shadows of prehistory. This isn't just a minor dating discrepancy, it's a challenge to Ethiopia's entire medieval narrative, one that could rewrite the timeline of African civilization. Take a closer look at the church's outer walls, and you'll notice something curious. The weathering doesn't match 800 years of exposure. The rock faces show deep, rounded grooves and scalloped hollows, patterns typically seen in structures exposed to rainfall for millennia, not centuries. Compare this to known 12th century carvings elsewhere in Ethiopia, like the tombs of Tigray, and the difference is stark. Those sites display sharp, crisp edges, their details still intact. Lalibela's ware suggests a far longer conversation with the elements, as if the churches stood open to the sky long before King Lalibela's reign. The controversy deepens when you examine the drainage systems. These channels, meticulously carved to divert rainwater, show erosion rates indicating they've been functioning for at least 3,000 years. Some researchers point to climatic data. While the region today is relatively dry, geological records show periods of intense rainfall around 1000 BC. Could Lalibela's churches have been carved during this wetter era, then abandoned and forgotten, only to be rediscovered and repurposed by the Zagwe dynasty? It's a radical idea, but the stone seems to whisper its approval. Mainstream historians push back, arguing that oral traditions and carbon dating of nearby artifacts firmly anchor the site to the 12th century. Yet even they can't fully explain the architectural anomalies. Why do some churches display construction techniques absent from other Zagwe-era buildings? Why are certain decorative motifs like the lotus flowers carved into Bete Mariam's ceiling more reminiscent of ancient Egyptian styles than medieval Ethiopian art? The geologist's theory offers a provocative answer. These elements aren't outliers but remnants of an earlier hand, one that worked the stone when the pharaohs still ruled the Nile. The implications ripple far beyond academia. If Lalibela predates the Zagwe dynasty who carved it, some speculate about the lost kingdom of Punt, a fabled trading partner of ancient Egypt mentioned in hieroglyphs. Others suggest the Aksumite Empire's predecessors, a civilization advanced enough to build in stone but lost to time. The most daring theorists even propose a connection to the Queen of Sheba's era, threading Lalibela into the same legendary tapestry as Jerusalem's Temple Mount. What's undeniable is the precision of the erosion evidence. Water doesn't lie, it leaves a consistent, measurable record. The controversy forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our understanding of African history might be built on fragments, with entire chapters waiting beneath the surface. Whether the churches are medieval marvels or ancient relics, their true origin story may still be hidden in plain sight, etched not in parchment or pigment, but in the slow, patient handwriting of rain and time. Every curve and column in Lalibela's churches whispers a hidden language, one where stone becomes scripture and architecture transforms into theology. Take Bete Medhain Alam, the largest monolithic church in the world, where 72 pillars stand in silent perfection. At first glance, they appear purely structural, holding up the roof with quiet dignity. But look closer and the symbolism unfolds. These columns represent the 72 disciples sent out by Christ in the Gospel of Luke, each one a physical embodiment of divine mission. The number isn't arbitrary, it's a coded message, a way to make the biblical narrative tangible for worshippers who might never hold a parchment. The churches aren't just buildings, they're three-dimensional parables. Bete Mariam, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, cradles secrets in its walls. Carved into its ceiling are faint lotus flowers, an unexpected motif in a Christian church, until you realize they echo the ancient Egyptian symbol of rebirth. Here, they're reinterpreted as emblems of Mary's purity and Christ's resurrection, blending local tradition with universal faith. Even the church's three-tiered design holds meaning. The lower level symbolizes earth, the middle represents heaven, and the upper space, accessible only to priests, stands for the divine realm beyond human reach. Worshippers literally ascend through spiritual states as they move through the space. Then there's Bete Golgotha, where the walls tell the story of Christ's passion without a single written word. 7 niches mark the stations of the cross, inviting pilgrims to walk the path of suffering in miniature. A hidden chamber bears a carving of Christ's tomb, while nearby, an unmarked recess is said to hold the bones of King Lalibela himself. A deliberate parallel suggesting the king's role as both earthly ruler and spiritual intermediary. The entire church becomes a tactile gospel, where every shadow and surface reinforces sacred narrative, but perhaps the most poignant symbolism lies in what wasn't built. Unlike European cathedrals stretching skyward, Lalibela's churches are sunken, their roofs level with the ground. This inversion carries profound theological weight rather than humanity reaching up toward God. These spaces suggest divinity descending to meet us. The act of entering requires physical humility. Doorways force even the tallest worshipper to bow, enacting reverence before crossing the threshold. Light filters through precisely angled windows, illuminating altars only at certain hours, turning sunlight itself into a liturgical calendar. Even the rock's imperfections were woven into the story. In Bete a natural fissure runs along one wall, not a flaw, but a deliberate inclusion representing the cleft in the rock where Moses hid to glimpse God's glory. The builders saw holiness not despite the stone's irregularities, but because of them, transforming geological accidents into sacred signs. This symbolic language wasn't static, it evolved with each generation. Later carvings added to Bete Giyorgis depict Ethiopian saints alongside biblical figures, anchoring universal stories in local soil. The tunnels between churches, once practical routes, became metaphors for spiritual journeys, dark passages symbolizing doubt or penance, emerging into light-filled sanctuaries representing grace. What emerges is a revelation. Lalibela's architects didn't just construct places of worship. They engineered encounters with the divine, where every step, every glance, every touch whispered another layer of meaning. To walk through these churches is to move through living theology, where faith isn't just taught but experienced, one carved symbol at a time. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has been the silent guardian of Lalibela's mysteries for centuries, not with lock and key, but through something far more enduring: the living pulse of oral tradition and ritual. Imagine a sacred trust passed down not in dusty manuscripts, but in the cadence of chants, the rhythm of processions, and the hushed teachings between generations of priests. While historians rely on parchment and carbon dating, the Church has preserved Lalibela's essence through something intangible yet unbreakable: memory woven into worship. Walk through the churches during Timkat, Ethiopia's Epiphany celebration, and you'll witness history breathing. Priests clad in vibrant robes carry replica arcs called tabots through the same sunken trenches used 800 years ago, their footsteps echoing those of long-departed pilgrims. The hymns they sing aren't just prayers, they're oral archives, lyrics preserving construction techniques lost to written records. One chant describes angels with tools of fire, a poetic reference some scholars interpret as coded knowledge of metalworking or even forgotten quarrying methods. Another recounts the precise sequence in which certain churches were carved, details that align with modern archaeological findings. These aren't mere legends, they're mnemonics crafted to safeguard truths too precious to entrust to perishable pages. The Church's role extends beyond preservation, its active interpretation. Certain rituals reenact the very act of building. During the annual festival of Jenna, priests and deacons form human chains, passing stones hand to hand in a symbolic recreation of the debris removal process. Participants speak of entering a trance-like state, as if channeling the laborers of old, their movements precise, almost involuntary. Older clergy whisper that these ceremonies aren't just commemorations, they're initiations, meant to awaken ancestral knowledge in the bodies of the faithful. Then there are the guarded secrets. Deep within Bete Mariam lies a small chamber accessible only to senior clergy. Here, they claim, rests the original tools used to carve the churches, not displayed as relics but hidden as sacred objects too powerful for public view. Outsiders dismiss this as myth, but consider this. When researchers asked to examine the chamber, priests produced a single rusted chisel head. Metallurgical analysis revealed an alloy unknown in 12th century Ethiopia, with traces of minerals suggesting it was forged elsewhere, possibly Yemen or even India. How it came to Lalibela remains unexplained, but the Church treats it as proof their oral histories hold tangible truth. Modern ceremonies breathe new life into ancient stones. Every morning before dawn, priests light oil lamps in the churches using wicks made from a specific plant that grows only near Lalibela. The smoke carries resinous scents described in medieval texts, creating a sensory bridge across centuries. Pilgrims kneel where the soot of countless lamps has darkened ceilings, adding another layer to the patina of devotion. Even the cracks in the walls receive ritual attention, filled not with modern cement but a traditional mortar whose recipe, passed orally between church artisans, includes honey and crushed volcanic glass. The most profound preservation happens unseen. young novices memorize not just scripture but architectural details, the exact dimensions of every pillar, the angle of every window. This knowledge is tested in candlelit examinations where boys must recite measurements blindfolded, proving their mastery of spaces they know by touch as much as sight. It's a living blueprint, ensuring that if catastrophe struck, the churches could theoretically be recreated from memory alone. Critics argue the church's secrecy hinders research, but there's wisdom in their caution. When outsiders first documented Lalibela in the 1920s, their published accounts triggered a wave of thefts, ancient crosses, and icons looted by collectors. Since then, the clergy have balanced sharing with safeguarding, allowing controlled study while keeping certain mysteries cloaked. Their stance reflects a deeper philosophy. Some truths aren't meant to be dissected under microscopes, but experienced through generations of whispered prayers and candle smoke. Today, as tourists snap photos and scholars debate theories, the church maintains its vigil. The same hands that carve new candles from beeswax also trace the original chisel marks on Bete Giyorgis' walls, feeling for changes in the stone's texture that might signal erosion. The hymns still rise at dusk, lyrics unchanged for centuries, each syllable a stitch in the tapestry holding Lalibela's soul intact. In a world obsessed with disclosure, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church reminds us that some wonders endure precisely because they remain partially veiled, not as riddles to be solved, but as mysteries to be lived. When Portuguese missionaries first stumbled upon Lalibela in the early 1500s, their letters back to Europe crackled with disbelief. Father Francisco Alvarez, a Jesuit sent by King Manuel I, wrote of climbing the highlands only to freeze in his tracks before him stood a work not of men but of angels. His detailed account describes churches so finely carved they appear to hang from heaven itself, their windows cut like lace from a single piece of stone. The sheer scale left him grasping for comparisons. Not even Solomon's temple could rival this, for those blocks were merely stacked. Here, the very mountains have been turned inside out. These European visitors arrived expecting primitive worship sites, only to confront an architectural marvel that shattered their prejudices. Alvarez's companion, priest João Bermudes, scribbled frantic notes about the underground tunnels, convinced they discovered the lost mines of King Solomon. The passages twist like serpents, he wrote, but the walls are smooth as cathedral glass, though no tool marks betray their making. Their shock wasn't just aesthetic, it was theological. How could a Christian kingdom their maps barely acknowledged surpass the engineering feats of Renaissance Europe? The missionaries' sketches and journals revealed deeper layers of astonishment. One illustration of Bete Giyorgis, the cross-shaped church, bears a handwritten note. The angles are so exact, one might think the builders possessed Euclid's own compass, yet the locals claim no knowledge of geometry. Another passage describes watching priests light incense in Bete Mariam as sunlight struck a hidden carving of the Virgin, making her robe glow as if woven from fire. The Europeans oscillated between admiration and unease, struggling to reconcile Lalibela's sophistication with their worldview. Most telling is what they omitted. Alvarez's original letters mention conversations with elderly priests who spoke of older hands working the stone long before King Lalibela's time, a detail conspicuously absent from the published versions sent to Rome. Perhaps the idea that African builders predated European cathedral architects was too disruptive for 16th-century audiences. Even in their awe, the missionaries couldn't fully escape the biases of their era, filtering Lalibela's wonder through a lens of colonial superiority. Yet their accounts remain invaluable not just as historical records, but as mirrors reflecting the instant when one civilization's assumptions collided with another's brilliance. The Portuguese came to convert, but left converted themselves, carrying tales that would seed debates in European courts for centuries. A marginal note in Bermude's journal captures this pivot perfectly. If such marvels exist at the edge of Christendom, perhaps we've been measuring God's favor with the wrong scales all along. Lalibela's churches have stood for centuries, but time is no longer their ally. The soft volcanic rock that once yielded to chisels now crumbles under relentless sun, seasonal rains, and the tremors of an active rift valley beneath Ethiopia. UNESCO designation as a World Heritage Site in 1978 brought global attention and urgent challenges. The very elements that shaped these wonders now threaten to erase them. Rainfall, once channeled away by ancient drainage systems, seeps into hairline cracks, freezing and expanding in rare overnight frosts. Tourists, drawn by the site's fame, inadvertently accelerate the damage. The oils from thousands of fingertips slowly degrade carvings, while the vibration of footsteps weakens already fragile walls. Even the breath of crowds alters the microclimate inside the churches, causing condensation that invites mold and salt crystallization, invisible forces eating away at history. UNESCO conservation team faces a near-impossible balancing act. How do you preserve a living, sacred site while protecting it from those who come to worship and wonder? Their solutions are as innovative as the churches themselves. Protective shelters now hover over key structures like Bete Giyorgis, their steel frames engineered to mimic the original rock's thermal properties, preventing micro-cracks from temperature swings. Beneath the churches, a network of fiber optic sensors monitors stress points in real time, alerting engineers to shifts that could signal collapse. But the most delicate intervention happens at ground level. A barely noticeable lattice of nearly invisible nylon threads strung across doorways to gently discourage touch without blocking access. Earthquakes pose a more volatile threat. Ethiopia's Great Rift Valley shudders with tectonic activity, and each tremor sends shockwaves through the church's foundations. Traditional reinforcement methods risked altering the structure's appearance, so engineers turned to an ancient technique: hidden anchors. Nearly 2 miles of carbon fiber rods, thin but stronger than steel, were threaded through existing cracks and voids, binding the rock from within like invisible sutures. The result, a 7.8 magnitude quake in 2020, left nearby towns in ruins, but Lalibela's churches stood unscathed. Tourism presents its own paradox. Visitor fees fund 80% of conservation efforts, yet the site's popularity strains its fragile ecosystem. The solution: invisible management. Instead of barricades, subtle cues guide behavior, lighting that subtly directs flow. Local clergy who share conservation messages as part of spiritual guidance. Even the strategic placement of incense burners whose smoke naturally discourages overcrowding in sensitive areas. The number of daily visitors is now carefully controlled, with timed entries that spread impact across the day. Perhaps the most ambitious project remains unseen. Using laser scanners, researchers have created millimeter-perfect digital replicas of every church, a backup in case catastrophe strikes. But even technology bows to tradition here. The scans were blessed by priests before being uploaded, blending cutting-edge science with ancient reverence. The fight to save Lalibela isn't just about stone, it's about safeguarding a continuum of faith and culture. Every preservation decision is made in consultation with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, ensuring that protective measures honor the site's spiritual heartbeat. When repairs are needed, artisans use the same locally sourced volcanic tuff as the original builders, their tools replicas of medieval designs. Even the mortar mixes match 12th century recipes: goat hair and lime reinforcing the blend, just as they did when King Lalibela's workers first pressed it between stones. What unfolds here daily is a quiet revolution in heritage conservation, one where drones monitor erosion while priests chant psalms, where science and spirituality work as partners rather than opponents. The challenges are immense, but so is the resolve. For those tasked with protecting Lalibela, failure isn't an option. They're not just preserving architecture, but holding together a bridge between earth and heaven, one carefully calibrated intervention at a time. Standing in the courtyard of Bete Giyorgis as dawn breaks on the summer solstice, you'll witness an architectural miracle repeating itself for the 800th time. A razor-thin beam of sunlight slipping through a narrow window, striking a carved cross on the far wall with pinpoint accuracy. This isn't coincidence, it's celestial choreography. Across Lalibela, subtle alignments tie the churches to the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, revealing a layer of sacred geometry that transforms these structures into colossal astronomical instruments. Ethiopia's relationship with the heavens runs deep. Long before European observatories, the highlands were home to astrologer priests known as the Bahatawi, who tracked planetary cycles from mountaintop shrines. Their knowledge wasn't abstract, it dictated planting seasons, royal coronations, and religious festivals. The Zagwe builders likely absorbed this tradition, encoding celestial patterns into Lalibela's very stones. Bete Mariam's eastern doorway aligns with sunrise during the Feast of the Cross, flooding the interior with light precisely as priests begin morning prayers. The trench surrounding Bete Medhain Alam acts as a sundial. Shadows cast by its parapets mark liturgical hours with uncanny precision, but the most striking evidence lies underground. Descend into the tunnel connecting Bete Gabriel to Bete Mercurios during the winter solstice, and you'll find sunlight refracting through a strategically placed aperture, projecting a shimmering cross onto the back wall for exactly 7 minutes, the exact duration of a key prayer in the Ethiopian Orthodox liturgy. Similar phenomena occur in Bete Amanul, where certain wall carvings only illuminate when the Pleiades constellation reaches its zenith during the January festival of Timkat. Some alignments defy easy explanation. The 11 churches' positions mirror the pattern of stars in the constellation Orion as it appeared in the 12th century, with Bete Giyorgis representing the bright star Rigel. Satellite mapping reveals even more astonishing correlations. The distance between key churches matches proportions found in ancient Egyptian stellar temples, suggesting shared astronomical knowledge along the Nile trade routes. Why embed such complexity in stone? For medieval Ethiopians, the cosmos wasn't separate from worship, it was its canvas. The roof of Bete Abba Libanos contains drill holes corresponding to major stars in Ursa Major, possibly used for nighttime navigation by pilgrims. Certain windows filter sunlight to project seasonal symbols, a sheaf of wheat during harvest months, a lamb during Easter. This wasn't just decoration, it was theology made visible, a way to tangibly connect earth and heaven. Modern researchers continue uncovering hidden alignments. Using 3D modeling, archaeologists recently discovered that the angle of Bete Golgotha's main arch frames the full moon only on the eve of important fast days. The church's interior columns cast interlocking shadows during equinoxes, forming patterns resembling ancient Ge'ez script, possibly hidden messages for initiated clergy. Even the church's acoustic properties play a role. Chanting during certain celestial events creates harmonic resonances that vibrate specific carvings, causing hidden chambers to vibrate like tuning forks. What emerges is a revelation. Lalibela's builders didn't just carve churches, they sculpted sacred time itself, freezing celestial rhythms in volcanic rock. Every solstice alignment, every star-mapped corridor, whispers of a civilization that saw no divide between praying and stargazing, between architecture and cosmology. The heavens weren't merely observed here, they were invited down to earth, to dance across these stone walls in light and shadow, century after century. Among the most tantalizing and controversial theories surrounding Lalibela's construction is the idea that its builders wielded technology far beyond simple chisels and hammers. Some researchers point to the church's laser-like precision, their surfaces so smooth they seem polished by something more advanced than medieval tools. The walls of Bete Amanul, for instance, feature cuts with a uniformity that even modern diamond-tipped blades would struggle to replicate, fueling speculation about lost or even otherworldly methods. Could ancient artisans have harnessed concentrated light or sound waves to slice through rock? Proponents of these fringe theories often cite similar precision in other ancient sites, from Peru's Sacsayhuaman to Egypt's pyramids, suggesting a forgotten global knowledge, one that might explain Lalibela's eerily seamless architecture. One particularly bold hypothesis revolves around the use of sonic levitation. Local legends speak of the church's stones being sung into place, a phrase some interpret as coded knowledge of acoustic technology. Experiments with high-frequency sound waves have shown they can soften certain types of rock, making them easier to carve. If Lalibela's workers possessed such techniques, it might explain the absence of tool marks and debris. The stone could have been manipulated rather than brute-forced into shape. Even more fantastical are claims of light tools described in Ethiopian monastic texts, vague references to devices that cut without touching, which some fringe historians argue could describe rudimentary laser-like instruments powered by lenses or crystals. Mainstream archaeologists, however, dismiss these ideas as imaginative overreach. They point to the simpler, yet no less ingenious, methods available at the time. Volcanic tuff, the rock composing Lalibela's churches, is relatively soft when first exposed to air, hardening over time. Skilled craftsmen could have exploited this property, working the stone during its most malleable phase with basic iron chisels and abrasives. The smooth surfaces, a result of painstaking polishing with quartz, sand, and water, techniques still used by traditional stoneworkers in Ethiopia today. As for the missing rubble, historians propose it was repurposed, crushed into mortar, or scattered deliberately to fertilize fields, a pragmatic solution rather than evidence of vanished tech. The divide between these perspectives reveals a deeper tension in how we interpret the past. For some, Lalibela's perfection demands extraordinary explanations, a refusal to believe human hands alone could achieve such marvels. For others, the real wonder lies in the ingenuity of those hands, proof that patience, communal effort, and generations of refined skill can rival any futuristic tool. The truth may never be fully uncovered, but perhaps that's the point. Lalibela's mystery isn't just a puzzle to solve, it's a mirror reflecting our own awe, forcing us to reckon with how much ancient civilizations could truly accomplish, and how much we might still have left to learn. In the shadow of Lalibela's ancient churches, a small group of modern artisans keep alive traditions that might just hold the key to the site's greatest mysteries. These stonemasons, often working with nothing more than hand-forged iron chisels and wooden mallets, demonstrate techniques that look almost untouched by the centuries. Watch them chip away at volcanic rock, and you'll notice something remarkable: the angle of their strikes, the rhythm of their taps, even the way they test the stone's resonance by knocking gently before each cut mirrors descriptions from medieval Ethiopian manuscripts. Some families here claim lineages stretching back to the original builders, their knowledge passed through whispered instructions and hands-on apprenticeships rather than written manuals. One elderly craftsman, kneeling beside a half-carved baptismal font, demonstrates how his grandfather taught him to find the veins in the rock natural weak points where it splits cleanly under precise pressure. His fingers trace barely visible lines in the stone, showing where to strike for maximum effect with minimum effort. "The mountain speaks if you know how to listen," he says, echoing a phrase local masons have used for generations. Nearby, younger workers mix mortar using a recipe of crushed volcanic ash, egg whites, and fig tree sap, a formula some believe dates back to Lalibela's construction. The resulting adhesive hardens to near concrete strength, yet remains slightly flexible, allowing repairs to expand and contract with temperature shifts just like the original stonework. But are these truly ancient techniques or later innovations? Archaeologists note striking similarities between modern practices and tool marks on the churches. The distinctive feathering pattern seen on Bete Giyorgis' interior columns, delicate parallel grooves that catch the light, can be replicated exactly using a special rocking motion with locally made chisels. Yet other methods defy easy explanation. Some masons speak of cold carving, a process where certain rocks are worked at dawn when dew makes them more pliable, a phenomenon geologists confirm occurs with Lalibela's particular type of volcanic tuff. Others describe using heated metal rods to create microfractures along planned cut lines, a technique that leaves no visible tool marks, perhaps explaining the church's eerily smooth surfaces. The most guarded knowledge involves scaffolding. While modern conservationists erect steel frames, local builders demonstrate an ingenious alternative. They weave towers from eucalyptus branches tied with leather strips, their flexibility absorbing vibrations that could damage delicate carvings. Oral histories suggest the original workers used similar structures, burning them afterward to leave no trace, a possible solution to the missing debris mystery. Even the handling of waste rock has traditional solutions. Apprentices learn to crush fragments into powder for mortar or scatter them in nearby fields where iron oxides enrich the soil, just as ancient builders might have done. What's fascinating is how this living tradition evolves. Younger masons now incorporate laser levels alongside ancestral methods, using technology not to replace but to verify their work. During a recent restoration of Bete Giyorgis' roof, elders guided the team using only lunar cycles and shadow lengths to determine the correct angles, then smiled when digital measurements confirmed their precision to within millimeters. This blend of old and new hints at how Lalibela's original builders might have worked, blending generations of accumulated wisdom with whatever innovations their era offered. The true test comes during rare apprenticeship ceremonies where novices must carve a perfect replica of Bete Mariam's famous window grille, all curves and interlocking crosses using only tools and methods available in the 12th century. Those who succeed describe entering a flow state where the stone shows you where to cut, suggesting intuitive knowledge passed through muscle memory as much as instruction. Whether this represents an unbroken chain from Lalibela's creators or brilliant reverse engineering remains debated. But when sunlight filters through a newly carved lattice, casting the same shadow patterns found in 800-year-old windows, the distinction hardly seems to matter. In these moments, the past isn't studied, it's felt in the vibration of the chisel, the scent of freshly split rock, and the quiet certainty that some threads of wisdom never truly break. Beneath the familiar contours of Lalibela's sunlit sanctuaries, modern technology has begun to reveal shadows of the unknown, hidden voids and sealed chambers that hint at secrets still buried. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in 2019 sent shockwaves through the archaeological community, mapping a labyrinth of unexplored spaces beneath Bete Mariam and Bete Medhain Alam. These aren't natural fissures but carefully enclosed rooms, their geometric shapes betraying human intention. One chamber in particular, tucked directly beneath Bete Giyorgis' altar, shows dimensions too precise to be accidental, a perfect square measuring roughly 12 by 12 feet, its ceiling arched like a miniature replica of the church above it. The discovery raises tantalizing questions. What or who might these spaces have been meant to protect? Historians are divided. Some theorize these could be the long-rumored scriptoria, where monks safeguarded illuminated manuscripts and architectural plans. Ethiopian tradition speaks of the Book of Lalibela, a lost guide detailing construction techniques, possibly hidden when the Zagwe dynasty fell. Others point to the chamber's strategic placement beneath altars, suggesting they might house tabots, consecrated replicas of the Ark of the Covenant considered too sacred for public view. Ground scans show metallic anomalies in several voids, fueling speculation about ritual objects or even the legendary tools used to carve the churches. But the most electrifying theory comes from acoustics. When researchers mapped sound wave reflections, they detected peculiar reverberations beneath Bete Amenul patterns consistent with large metal plates or gongs. This aligns with obscure monastic texts describing echo chambers, where priests used resonant frequencies to test the stability of stone during construction. If true, these spaces might preserve not artifacts but knowledge, a sonic blueprint of how to listen to the rock, a skill said to have guided the original builders' chisels. The mysteries multiply when you consider what hasn't been found. Despite extensive scanning, no tunnels connect these chambers to the surface, no hidden doorways, no shafts, not even ventilation channels. How were they accessed? Some scholars propose an unsettling answer: they weren't. Certain chambers might be final seals, spaces deliberately walled off after their purpose was served, like ancient time capsules embedded in the stone. Infrared thermography reveals temperature differentials in the walls surrounding Bete Giyorgis' suspected void patterns that could indicate hollow spaces filled with liquid, perhaps holy water or consecrated oil stored for ritual use. Local clergy guard these discoveries with quiet intensity. When archaeologists requested permission to drill microscopic boreholes for endoscopic cameras, the church's response was telling: a conditional yes, but only during specific liturgical hours and only after 3 days of fasting and prayer. The first attempt, in 2021, captured blurred images of what appear to be stacked stone tablets before condensation fogged the lens. Subsequent efforts have been postponed, leaving the chamber's contents to speculation. What makes these hidden spaces so compelling isn't just what they might contain, but what they represent: proof that even after 8 centuries, Lalibela hasn't surrendered all its secrets. The churches we admire today might merely be the visible chapter of a much deeper story, one still being written in the echoes and shadows beneath our feet. Every scan, every measurement peels back another layer, reminding us that true wonder lies not just in what we can see, but in what remains just beyond our grasp. Lalibela's rock-hewn churches are far from alone in the annals of monolithic architecture, yet they occupy a category entirely their own. Compare them to Jordan's Petra, where the famous treasury facade dazzles with its Hellenistic elegance, and the differences leap out. Petra's monuments are tombs and temples carved into rose-red cliffs, their ornate facades designed to impress from a distance. But step inside and you'll find mostly hollow chambers, their interiors rough and utilitarian. Lalibela flips this paradigm. Here, the true marvel lies not in the outer walls, often plain and unadorned, but in the intricately sculpted interiors, where every column, arch, and vault was painstakingly hollowed from within. It's architecture in reverse. Where Petra shouts its grandeur outward, Lalibela turns inward, creating sacred spaces that reveal their genius only to those who enter. Then there's India's Ellora caves, another breathtaking feat of rock-carved devotion. The Kailasa temple, a monolith dedicated to Shiva, astonishes with its sheer verticality. Workers chiseled downward from the top of a basalt cliff, removing an estimated 200,000 tons of stone. Yet Ellora's carvings, while magnificent, serve a different purpose. Their narrative depicting Hindu epics in swirling reliefs that wrap around the rock. Lalibela's churches, by contrast, are austere in decoration but profound in spatial symbolism. Their power lies not in storytelling sculptures, but in the way their very architecture orchestrates movement and light to create embodied prayer. Where Ellora's walls tell myths, Lalibela's stones become liturgy. Even among Christian rock-cut sites, Lalibela stands apart. Cappadocia's underground cities in Turkey are engineering marvels, with ventilation shafts and multi-level complexes housing thousands. But they were primarily refuges, practical shelters from invaders. Lalibela's tunnels and chambers, though equally ingenious, serve a higher ambition. Not just to protect bodies, but to transform souls. The churches aren't hideouts, they're thresholds between earth and heaven, designed to guide worshippers through spiritual journeys as tangible as the physical ones. What truly sets Lalibela apart, though, is its living sacredness. While Petra and Ellora are frozen in time, relics of vanished civilizations, Lalibela pulses with uninterrupted devotion. Pilgrims still kiss the worn steps of Bete Mariam. Priests still chant in jazz within Bete Medhain Alam's shadows, and the scent of incense still curls through tunnels carved 8 centuries ago. This isn't a museum piece, it's a living, breathing sanctuary where the sacred and the everyday intertwine. The rock isn't just carved, it's consecrated, worn smooth by generations of fingertips tracing prayers into stone. Scale alone doesn't explain Lalibela's uniqueness. The Abu Simbel temples in Egypt dwarf its churches, their colossal statues of Ramses Roman II looming over the Nile. But Abu Simbel was a statement of pharaonic power, its relocation in the 1960s a triumph of modern engineering over ancient craft. Lalibela, by contrast, remains where and as it was made, not a transplanted wonder, but an organic outgrowth of faith rooted in its landscape. Even the volcanic tuff from which it's carved seems to participate in its holiness, weathering just enough to glow golden at sunset, as if lit from within. Perhaps the most telling comparison isn't to other rock-hewn sites at all, but to Europe's Gothic cathedrals. Both represent pinnacles of sacred architecture, yet their philosophies diverge. Notre Dame reaches skyward, its spires straining toward the divine. Lalibela does the opposite, it descends, inviting heaven to meet humanity in the depths. Where Gothic stonework aspires to lightness, Lalibela's architecture embraces weight, finding transcendence not in defying gravity, but in collaborating with the earth itself. This is architecture as an act of humility, where the builders didn't conquer the mountain, but listened to it, uncovering the sacred spaces they believed were already there, waiting to be revealed. In the end, what makes Lalibela singular isn't just the technique or the scale. It's the marriage of staggering ambition with intimate spirituality. Other sites awe us with their grandeur. Lalibela awes us by making the divine tangible. Walking its sunken pathways, you don't just see history, you feel it in the coolness of the stone, hear it in the echoes of chant, sense it in the way light falls at certain hours like a blessing. This isn't architecture meant to impress kings or commemorate conquests. It's a love letter to the sacred, carved not just into rock, but into the very idea of what a holy place can be. Among the most tantalizing threads in Lalibela's mystery are whispers of distant hands shaping its stone speculation that medieval knights or Egyptian monks may have lent their skills to this African marvel. The Templar theory, though romantic, rests on fragile foundations. Proponents point to the church's cross-shaped designs and hidden tunnels, arguing these mirror Templar architectural signatures like Jerusalem's Dome of the Rock underground passages. They highlight the knightly order's known presence in nearby Axum during the Crusades, where some accounts describe Templars trading secrets with Ethiopian monks. But dig deeper and the evidence crumbles. Lalibela's crosses are distinctly Ethiopian Maltese or Latin crosses favored by European orders don't appear. The tunnels, while impressive, lack the geometric precision of Templar-engineered structures, their curves following natural rock faults rather than Euclidean perfection. The Coptic connection proves more intriguing. Egypt's ancient Christian community had deep ties to Ethiopia, sharing liturgical traditions and architectural know-how. Some scholars note similarities between Lalibela's sunken courtyards and Egypt's rock-cut Coptic monasteries like those in Wadi el Natron. The most compelling parallel lies in the ceiling of Bete Mariam, where carved lotus blossoms echo Coptic motifs blending pharaonic and Christian symbolism. Yet even here, the influence may be indirect. While Coptic artisans certainly visited Ethiopia, their style evident in earlier Aksumite structures, Lalibela's techniques diverge sharply. Coptic builders typically carved inward from cliff faces, while Lalibela's top-down method required inverse engineering unseen in Egyptian sites, the strongest argument against foreign involvement. The stone itself, petrographic analysis reveals chisel marks aligning perfectly with local tool-making traditions, not European or Middle Eastern methods. The church's proportions follow Ethiopia's unique system of measurement based on the cubit of Lalibela's royal architect, not the standardized Roman or Egyptian cubits. Even the errors are local. Occasional misalignments match stress patterns found only in this region's volcanic tuff, suggesting workers intimately familiar with the material's quirks. Perhaps the truth lies not in borrowed blueprints but shared inspiration. Medieval Christendom was surprisingly interconnected, with ideas flowing along trade routes like incense trails. A Coptic monk might have described Jerusalem's holy sites to Lalibela's planners, or an Ethiopian pilgrim returned with sketches of Byzantine domes, but the execution. That unmistakably bears the mark of highland artisans. The real miracle isn't foreign intervention. It's how Ethiopian hands transformed whispers of distant lands into something profoundly their own. Modern laser scans have peeled back layers of Lalibela's mystery, only to reveal just how much we still don't understand. In 2018, a team from the University of Hamburg deployed advanced LiDAR technology, creating millimeter-perfect three-dimensional maps of every church. The scans illuminated details invisible to the naked eye, tool marks showing where chisels changed angle mid-stroke, subtle variations in wall thickness that prevent echo distortion during prayers, even hidden symbols carved into ceiling beams faded by centuries of candle smoke. But the most startling discovery came from photogrammetry analysis. The church's foundations aren't anchored to bedrock as assumed. They float on carefully leveled platforms of compacted gravel, acting as natural shock absorbers for earthquakes. This explains how they've survived 8 centuries in an active rift zone, but raises new questions. How did medieval builders engineer seismic resilience without modern geology? Thermal imaging added another layer of intrigue. At dawn, certain walls of Bete Giyorgis heat up faster than others, revealing embedded stone, pipes, hollow channels that may have once circulated warm air or water for rituals. Even more perplexing are the subsurface scans beneath Bete Mariam, showing a spiderweb of tunnels diverging from known passageways. One branches northeast for over 200 feet before terminating abruptly at what appears to be a vertical shaft. Local priests call it the Well of Whispers, where voices carry impossibly far. When engineers lowered microphones into the shaft, they recorded low-frequency vibrations matching the natural resonance frequency of the surrounding rock, a phenomenon that could theoretically amplify sound across vast distances. Was this accidental acoustics or deliberate sonic engineering? The most unsettling revelation came from material analysis. X-ray fluorescence scans detected trace metals in the church walls, nickel and chromium alloys typically found in meteorites. Ethiopian legends speak of sky iron used for sacred tools, but finding these elements fused into the stone itself suggests something extraordinary. Either the builders incorporated meteoritic material into their mortar, or the volcanic tuff they carved from already contained celestial fragments. Either scenario rewrites our understanding of medieval Ethiopian metallurgy. Yet for every mystery solved, technology has unveiled deeper puzzles. Millimeter wave scans show sections where chisel strokes align with magnetic north, their precision deviating less than 0.3 degrees, an orientation impossible without compasses, which weren't used in Ethiopia until centuries later. Even more baffling are the church's acoustic signatures. Computer modeling reveals that when certain hymns are sung inside Bete Medhain Alam, sound waves converge precisely where a now missing altar once stood, creating a focal point where a single voice could be heard clearly throughout the massive space. The math behind this phenomenon, wave interference patterns cancelling echoes at specific frequencies, wasn't formally described until the 19th century. Perhaps the most humbling discovery is what technology can't decipher. The LiDAR maps show tool marks clustering in distinct work zones, suggesting teams of artisans followed an organized sequence, yet no two churches share the exact same workflow. Some were carved from the center outward, others top to bottom, a few in concentric rings like tree growth. This lack of standardization defies modern construction logic. Even artificial intelligence analysis of the chisel patterns can't identify consistent techniques. It's as if each church was built by a different school of thought, yet all achieved the same flawless result. The greatest gift of these high-tech investigations may be their confirmation of human ingenuity's boundless potential. For all our satellites and algorithms, we still can't replicate how 12th-century artisans turned a mountainside into a symphony of stone, light, and sound. Every scan seems to whisper the same truth, that Lalibela's real secret isn't in how it was built, but why. These weren't just structures, they were acts of devotion where every chisel stroke was a prayer and the rock itself became an altar. Every January, as the Ethiopian highlands bask in golden sunlight, Lalibela transforms from an archaeological wonder into a living tapestry of devotion. The Timkat festival, Ethiopian Epiphany, turns the stone churches into stages for one of Christianity's most vibrant celebrations. Imagine thousands of pilgrims clad in white shawls, their voices rising in ancient jazz chants as they gather around the sunken courtyard of Bete Giyorgis. Priests in embroidered velvet robes carry replica arks called tabots, veiled in rich fabrics and sheltered under colorful umbrellas, their procession winding through the same tunnels that have echoed with prayers for 8 centuries. This isn't a reenactment, it's continuity, a thread connecting medieval faith to modern practice without a single break. What makes Timkat here unlike anywhere else is how seamlessly ritual and architecture intertwine. As dawn breaks, worshippers descend into the trench known as Jordanos, its waters blessed to become a symbolic river Jordan. Parents lower infants into the pool, mirroring Christ's baptism, while elders dip their hands with reverence, the liquid catching sunlight through precisely angled windows carved for this moment. The churches themselves become participants in the liturgy. Bete Giyorgis' cross-shaped shadow falls perfectly across the gathered crowd at noon, while Bete Mariam's interior alcoves glow amber as sunlight refracts through incense smoke, creating the illusion of the walls breathing with sacred light. The sensory overload is deliberate. Drumbeats reverberate off the rock walls, their rhythms matching the pulse of chanted psalms. The scent of myrrh and frankincense, imported along the same trade routes that once brought Lalibela's architect's inspiration, hangs thick in the air. Pilgrims press their foreheads against the stone, tracing their fingers along grooves worn smooth by generations before them. In one corner, elderly women kneel to kiss a patch of wall where the rock bears a natural striation resembling the Virgin Mary's face, their whispers blending with the murmur of priests reciting verses from leather-bound texts older than the Reformation. But Timkat is just the crescendo in Lalibela's year-round symphony of faith. Ordinary days hum with quieter rituals, shopkeepers pausing at midday to pray in a church doorway, children learning scripture by tracing letters carved into bench stones, hushed confessions exchanged in tunnel shadows. The churches aren't museums but living organisms, their stones warmed by human touch, their acoustics shaped by centuries of hymnody. Even the wear patterns tell a story. The steps leading down to Bete Gabriel are bowed inward from countless bare feet, while the lintel of Bete Mercurio's entrance shines where pilgrims have grasped it for support, polishing the rock to a sheen. Modernity adapts to tradition here, not the other way around. When electricity came to Lalibela in the 1990s, the community insisted on bare bulbs rather than fluorescent tubes, their warm glow approximating candlelight to preserve the church's ancient ambience. Cell phones go silent near altars, not by posted rules but unspoken understanding. Even tourism, while economically vital, bows to spiritual priorities. On major feast days, the site closes to outsiders entirely, prioritizing pilgrims over cameras. This unbroken thread of devotion explains why Lalibela feels different from other historical religious sites. There's no glass separating visitors from artifacts because every stone is still in use, still believed to pulse with sacred energy. A priest repairing a cracked window ledge isn't a conservator. He's continuing his ancestors' work, mixing mortar with the same local volcanic ash as the original builders. When asked how long his family has served here, one deacon smiles, "Since the angels showed us where to chisel." Perhaps the most moving moment comes at dusk when tourists retreat and the churches return fully to their communities. The last light slants through Bete Giyorgis' windows, illuminating dust motes stirred by a day's worth of footsteps. A lone monk begins the evening prayer, his voice bouncing off walls that were shaped to carry sound this way intentionally. In this quiet hour, the past isn't reconstructed, it's relived, as present as the rock itself, humming with the faith of those who still believe heaven and earth meet in these carved hollows. Among the most colorful threads in Lalibela's tapestry of mystery are the whispers of extraterrestrial architects' claims that no human hands could have shaped these perfection. Ancient astronaut theorists point to the church's seamless angles and lack of tool marks as evidence of advanced technology, suggesting celestial beings shared knowledge with medieval builders. These ideas gained traction in the 1970s when a European researcher noted that the alignment of certain churches mirrors star patterns from 12,000 years ago, long before Lalibela's recorded construction. Never mind that the same stars were visible in the 12th century, the allure of cosmic intervention proved irresistible. Then there's the suppressed records crowd, convinced that Ethiopian emperors hid documents proving the churches predate Christianity altogether. They cite the occasional pre-Christian symbols carved into hidden corners, a stray sun disk here, an ankh-like shape there, as proof of a grand cover-up. Never mind that early Christian artisans often repurposed local motifs. The idea of a secret history tucked beneath Vatican vaults makes for better storytelling. The most persistent version claims Portuguese Jesuits stole scrolls proving Lalibela was built by the Queen of Sheba's engineers, though no archival evidence supports this. What these theories share is a refusal to accept the simplest explanation, that human ingenuity, fueled by faith and time, could achieve the extraordinary. The alien narrative particularly fascinates because it inverts our assumptions. If medieval Ethiopians couldn't possibly have built this, then who could? The answer, wrapped in starlight and mystery, lets us off the hook from wrestling with the real marvel, what people are capable of when united by purpose. But dismissing these ideas outright misses their deeper appeal. Conspiracy theories about Lalibela aren't just about spaceships or secret societies, they're expressions of awe in disguise. When faced with something as breathtaking as Bete Giyorgis, perfectly cross-shaped and carved downward into the earth, the human mind instinctively reaches for myths to match the scale of the wonder. In an age of satellites and AI, we've forgotten how radical it was for 12th century artisans to envision negative space, to see cathedrals not as structures to assemble but as shapes to reveal. The persistence of these tales reveals something poignant about how we process the past. Lalibela's true history of a king's vision, a dynasty's ambition, and countless unnamed hands working in sacred concert is arguably more compelling than any alien intervention. Yet we're drawn to the fantastical because it keeps the mystery alive, shielding the sight from the clinical dissection of academia. To suggest angels or astronauts carved these churches isn't just speculation. It's a form of protection, ensuring Lalibela never becomes merely a problem to solve, but remains a living question mark suspended between earth and sky. Ironically, the wildest theories often contain kernels of insight. Their ancient technology camp correctly notes that Lalibela's builders likely used techniques lost to time, not lasers, but forgotten methods of sound testing stone or calculating slopes with water levels. The hidden history proponents aren't wrong that oral traditions preserve knowledge absent from scrolls. They just mistake spiritual metaphors for literal blueprints. Even the alien enthusiasts accidentally highlight a truth. There is something almost otherworldly about standing in these sunken sanctuaries where the air hums with 8 centuries of prayers and the stone seems less carved than dreamed into being. In the end, these conspiracy theories flourish because Lalibela defies our modern arrogance, the notion that past societies couldn't possibly surpass our expectations. The churches stand as a rebuke to that shallowness, reminding us that wonder doesn't require extraterrestrial explanations, only the willingness to accept that human hands, hearts, and imaginations have always been capable of the miraculous. The real cover-up isn't hidden in Vatican basements or alien archives. It's our own reluctance to believe that people not so different from us could reach such heights, or rather, such depths. Lalibela's otherworldly beauty hasn't just captivated historians, it's ignited the imaginations of storytellers across film, literature, and gaming, transforming these rock-hewn churches into backdrops for adventure, intrigue, and the supernatural. Take the pulse-pounding opening sequence of the 2018 thriller The Secret of the Sacred Stone, where a rogue archaeologist navigates Lalibela's tunnels to uncover a mythical relic said to grant visions of the future. While the plot spirals into fantasy, the filmmakers didn't skimp on authenticity. They collaborated with Ethiopian scholars to recreate the church's acoustics, so whispers really do carry eerily through the set's faux rock corridors. The movie's success spawned a curious phenomenon: tourism spikes from viewers convinced the tunnels hide real secret chambers, despite the actual clergy chuckling at the idea. Literature, too, has woven Lalibela into its tapestry. Ken Follett's The Evening and the Morning features a subplot about medieval stonemasons inspired by rumors of Ethiopia's angels-made churches, while Naomi Benaren's The Last Journey of the Jews of Ethiopia uses Bete Giyorgis as a metaphor for sanctuary during a harrowing exodus. But the most poignant homage might be in The Shadow King, Maza Mengiste's novel of Italian-occupied Ethiopia, where a wounded resistance fighter hallucinates the church's crosses glowing in the dark, a testament to how deeply Lalibela symbolizes resilience in Ethiopian consciousness. Gaming worlds have eagerly looted Lalibela's mystique. The Uncharted series paid subtle tribute with a DLC level featuring a cliffside monastery clearly modeled after Bete Mariam, complete with hidden passages and crumbling stonework. Even Assassin's Creed players might recognize Lalibela's sunken courtyards in its depiction of 12th century Jerusalem, a cheeky reversal of history, since the real churches were designed to mirror the holy city. These digital recreations often exaggerate the site's scale, but they get one thing undeniably right: the sense of awe when sunlight pierces those ancient windows, an effect game designers laboriously replicate with ray tracing tech. Yet pop culture's embrace hasn't always been kind. A controversial 2015 video game, Tomb of the Divine, drew outrage for casting Lalibela as a dungeon filled with booby traps and undead priests, a portrayal the Ethiopian Orthodox Church called sacrilege dressed as entertainment. The backlash sparked a broader conversation: when does creative license cross into cultural erasure? Contrast this with the Lalibela Code, a best-selling puzzle novel that worked with clergy to weave actual liturgical riddles into its plot, donating proceeds to site preservation. The difference highlights a growing demand for storytelling that respects sacred spaces while still thrilling audiences. Perhaps the most unexpected homage came from music. Beyoncé's Black is King visuals included a striking, if stylized, homage to Lalibela's cruciform church, linking it to themes of African spiritual heritage. Meanwhile, Ethiopian jazz legend Milatu Astat composed the Stone Monolith Suite, using recordings of priests' chants inside Bete Medhain Alam to create haunting reverberations. These artistic nods, though fleeting, introduced Lalibela to millions who'd never crack a history book, proof that pop culture can be a bridge, not just a distortion. The cumulative effect, a curious duality. For many, their first encounter with Lalibela comes swathed in Hollywood fog or pixelated adventure, shaping expectations before they ever set foot in Ethiopia. Some arrive expecting Indiana Jones escapades, only to be humbled by the real thing's quiet majesty. Others, initially drawn by fiction, find themselves falling into deeper curiosity. Why did medieval architects carve downward? Who were the unnamed artisans? The churches endure as more than settings, they're mirrors reflecting back whatever seekers project upon them: mystery, divinity, or the untapped potential of human hands. After 8 centuries, Lalibela's mysteries still refuse to surrender to easy answers. Was it the work of angels, as the legends claim, a king's divine vision brought to life by thousands of devoted hands? Or evidence of a forgotten technology lost to time? The churches stand as silent witnesses, their secrets locked in stone. The geological puzzles alone would baffle modern engineers: how entire cathedrals were hollowed from living rock without leaving debris, how their walls defy erosion patterns suggesting far greater age, how hidden chambers beneath the altars remain sealed without visible entrances. Then there are the human enigmas, artisans who left no trace of their tools, a workforce that vanished from history, and a king whose legacy intertwines so completely with myth that separating fact from faith feels impossible. Even the most grounded theories raise new questions. If the churches were carved top-down, how did workers precisely calculate the interior spaces before breaking through? If the tunnels were escape routes, why do some dead end mysteriously? And why does the stone itself contain alloys not native to Ethiopia, as if the materials whispered of distant lands? Perhaps that's the true magic of Lalibela, not the answers it provides, but the wonder it ignites. These churches challenge us to reconsider what ancient civilizations were capable of, to marvel at the intersection of faith and ingenuity, and to question whether some mysteries are meant to endure. Now it's your turn. After unraveling these layers of history, legend, and speculation, what's your theory? Did celestial guidance shape these walls, or was it something even more extraordinary? Ordinary people achieving the extraordinary. Drop your thoughts below, and for those hungry to dig deeper, check out the pinned links for rare manuscripts and cutting-edge research. The conversation doesn't end here, it's